I never thought I would be the kind of woman to sit down and tell her story like this. For most of my life, I was the background character, the one who smiled, stayed quiet, and kept the house running while everyone else got the spotlight. My name? It doesn't really matter. What matters is the journey. And if you stay with me until the end, you'll understand why I'm telling you this today. Because the girl who was once overlooked, betrayed, and discarded became the woman her husband's mistress came crawling to for a job. But let's not jump ahead. Let's go back to the beginning. I met Daniel in college. He was tall, handsome, full of charm, and carried the kind of confidence that made people listen when he spoke. I was shy, bookish, and more interested in late-night library sessions than parties. He noticed me when nobody else did, and I thought that was love. We dated for 2 years, and when he proposed, I didn't hesitate. Everyone told me how lucky I was to land someone like him. Ambitious, outgoing, with big dreams of climbing the corporate ladder. What they didn't see was that behind every late-night study session, behind every internship interview, there was me, editing his resumes, helping him prepare speeches, ironing his shirts, making sure he had the right tie for the right meeting. I slipped naturally into the role of the helper. After we got married, his career took off. He got promoted, then promoted again. I was so proud of him. But somewhere along the way, I started losing myself. I had always dreamed of starting my own business. A small boutique, maybe an online shop. I loved design, I loved creating. But every time I mentioned it, Daniel would laugh and say, "Why stress yourself? You've got me. Focus on being the perfect wife. Maybe later." Later never came. In the beginning, I didn't mind. I told myself marriage was about teamwork, about sacrifice. So I sacrificed. I worked part-time jobs here and there, mostly to stay busy. I cooked, cleaned, planned his business dinners, entertained his colleagues. People thought we were the perfect couple. But behind closed doors, things weren't perfect at all. Daniel had a way of making me feel small. Not through shouting or hitting, but through something more subtle. If I ever suggested an idea, he'd smirk and say, "That's cute." If I asked for his support, he'd remind me how much money he was making, how I didn't need to worry my pretty head about business. I told myself this was normal. That love meant swallowing your pride sometimes. That as long as we had each other, we'd figure it out. But then came the cracks. It started with him coming home late. Dinners would get cold on the table, and he'd text me at 10 or 11 at night saying he had client meetings. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. But the perfume on his jacket wasn't mine, and the lipstick stains I pretended not to notice definitely weren't mine either. I confronted him once. He laughed. He actually laughed. He told me I was paranoid, that I was lucky to have him, that if I kept acting insecure, I'd push him away. So I shut up. I swallowed my suspicions. I kept cooking, cleaning, smiling at his colleagues, being the perfect wife, until the day he didn't come home at all. It was a Tuesday morning when I found out. He sat me down in the living room, his tone calm, almost rehearsed. "I think we should separate," he said. Just like that. No anger, no emotion, like he was firing an employee. My heart dropped. I asked why, and then he said the words that would haunt me for months. "You're comfortable, predictable. You're a good woman, but I need more. I need someone exciting, someone ambitious, someone who can match my energy." I stared at him, not even recognizing the man I had built my life around. And then, like adding salt to the wound, he said her name, Melissa. She was younger, prettier, worked in marketing at his firm, the kind of woman who wore high heels to breakfast and spoke like she owned every room she walked into. He didn't even have the decency to hide it. He admitted he'd been seeing her for months. And now he wanted to move on with her, just like that. 15 years of my life were dismissed like they were nothing. That night, I sat alone in the house I had turned into a home, staring at the walls that suddenly felt like prison bars. I cried until my throat was raw. I thought about every sacrifice I'd made, every dream I had buried for him, every time I had smiled when I wanted to scream. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to hate her. But more than anything, I hated myself for being blind, for being quiet, for giving up everything for someone who didn't even think I was worth fighting for. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. Once you're there, the only way left to go is up. And that night, between sobs and shattered pieces of my heart, I made a promise to myself I would never, ever let anyone make me feel small again. That was the beginning. The moment I stopped being the invisible wife and started becoming the woman I was always meant to be. The days after Daniel left were a blur. I barely ate. I barely slept. My phone rang constantly. Friends, family, even his colleagues calling to check in. Most of them didn't even know the truth. Daniel had told them we had grown apart. Grown apart? As if I had just quietly drifted away while he drifted into another woman's arms. For weeks, I stayed curled up on the couch, staring at the ceiling, asking myself where I went wrong. Was I not pretty enough? Not fun enough? Not ambitious enough? I replayed his words over and over. I need someone who can match my energy. But here's the thing about heartbreak. It either destroys you or fuels you. And one morning I woke up and realized I had two choices: stay broken or rebuild. I chose rebuild. At first, I didn't even know where to start. I had no grand plan, no investors, no rich family to fall back on. What I did have was an idea, one I had buried for years. I'd always loved fashion. Not runway couture, but practical, everyday fashion that made people feel confident. Back in college, I used to sketch designs in my notebooks. I even made a few outfits for friends. But when I married Daniel, I put those dreams away. Now, with nothing left to lose, I pulled them back out. I started small, just a handful of designs. Some secondhand fabric, and an old sewing machine I bought off Craigslist. I worked out of my living room, cutting fabric on the dining table, stitching late into the night. At first, it was just therapy, a way to keep my hands busy so my mind wouldn't spiral into thoughts of him. But then I sold my first piece online. It was a simple dress, nothing fancy. But when I saw that little notification, payment received, something inside me sparked. Someone out there had believed in my work enough to pay for it. And suddenly, I believed in it too. Of course, it wasn't smooth sailing. My bank account was thin, and I couldn't afford mistakes. Every dollar I made went back into supplies. I watched YouTube tutorials, read books on business, learned everything I could about marketing, e-commerce, and branding. There were nights I cried in frustration when orders got delayed, when customers complained, when I doubted myself. There were mornings I woke up to 0 sales and wondered if I was just chasing a stupid dream. But every time I wanted to give up, I remembered Daniel's smirk. His words. That's cute, and that's what kept me going. By the end of the first year, I had grown from selling a few pieces a month to running a small but steady online store. By the second year, I had hired one assistant to help me keep up with orders. By the third year, I was renting a small office space. And slowly, my broken heart began to heal. Not because of money, but because I finally saw myself as more than someone's wife. I was building something that was mine. As my business grew, so did I. I went from a woman who was afraid to speak up to one who led meetings with confidence. I went from someone who doubted her worth to someone who knew she could create value. My brand, True Grace, began to take off. Influencers started wearing my pieces. Magazines started calling. By year 5, we had our first storefront in the city, and by year 7, we weren't just a boutique anymore. We were a brand recognized nationwide. But here's the funny thing. I still kept a low profile. My face wasn't on billboards, and most people had no idea who the CEO was. I wanted it that way. It wasn't about fame. It was about the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had done it without anyone's help, especially without his help. Meanwhile, Daniel's life was different. I didn't stalk him. I didn't need to. People loved to gossip, and his name still floated around. Apparently, things with Melissa weren't as perfect as he imagined. She liked the money, yes, but she didn't like the long hours. They fought constantly. He changed jobs twice. And eventually, the whispers said, he started drinking. I should have felt sorry for him. But I didn't. Not after the way he discarded me. Instead, I focused on my company. We expanded to 3 cities. Our online sales hit 7 figures. And one day, my face ended up on the cover of a business magazine with the headline, "The Quiet Woman Behind the Fashion Revolution." When I saw that, I laughed until tears ran down my cheeks. The invisible wife, the comfortable woman, the one who wasn't ambitious enough, on the cover of Forbes. I wish I could have seen Daniel's face when he saw it. It happened on a rainy Monday morning. I was in my office going over a contract when my assistant knocked on the door. "There's a walk-in applicant here," she said. "She doesn't have an appointment, but she seems desperate." Should I turn her away? Normally I would have. We didn't hire walk-ins, but something in her tone made me pause. "Send her in," I said. And then she walked in. Melissa. Yes, the same Melissa. The woman Daniel had left me for. She didn't recognize me at first. My hair was different, my clothes sharper, my posture taller. But I recognized her instantly. She looked older now, worn down, her confidence dimmed. She clutched a folder like it was her lifeline. "I'm looking for a job," she said, her voice shaky. "I heard your company is expanding. I have experience in marketing." I'd take any position, really? I almost laughed. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. But I didn't laugh. I didn't gloat. I simply leaned back in my chair, letting her speak. She rambled about how things had gone downhill, how she'd been laid off, how hard it was to find work. She didn't mention Daniel by name, but she didn't have to. I knew. Finally, she stopped talking and looked at me expectantly, and that's when recognition flickered in her eyes. "Wait, do I know you?" she whispered. I smiled. Slowly, calmly, the kind of smile that comes from years of holding back, years of quiet victories. "Yes," I said. "You do." Her face paled. There was a long silence. She fidgeted, her eyes darting around the office, taking in the sleek furniture, the awards on the shelves, the framed magazine cover on the wall. Her gaze landed on my nameplate, CEO, Grace Williams. Her mouth opened, then closed again. "You're the CEO?" she finally stammered. "Yes," I said simply. I could see the memories flooding her, the smugness she once had, the way she looked down on me back then. And now here she was, sitting across from me begging for a job. I didn't know," she whispered. "Of course you didn't," I replied. "Nobody ever does. That's the funny thing about underestimating people. You never see them coming." She swallowed hard. "Listen, I know things. I know the past was complicated, but please, I really need this job." I leaned forward, my voice soft but firm. "We're not hiring, but thank you for applying." Her eyes widened, as if she couldn't believe I'd turned her down so easily. For a moment, I thought she'd argue, maybe even beg. But she didn't. She just nodded, stood up, and walked out, shoulders hunched, heels clicking against the floor like a retreating soldier. And me? I sat there, calm, collected, victorious. Not because I'd humiliated her, but because I didn't need to. My success spoke louder than any revenge ever could. That day I realized something important. Revenge isn't about destroying the other person. It's about proving, to yourself, that you were always more than what they saw. Daniel didn't define me. Melissa didn't define me. Their betrayal didn't define me. What defined me was how I rose after the fall, how I turned pain into power. So if you're listening to my story right now, sitting there with your own broken heart, your own betrayal, your own pile of shattered dreams, hear me when I say this. You are more than what they see. You are stronger than you think. And one day, the same people who doubted you may find themselves sitting across from you, realizing too late who you've become. Because the quiet girl they underestimated, she became the boss.